Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through our perpetually lefty, pinko, commie, soy boy, cuck, Antifa, super soldier filter, but more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig, I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. 2024, I'm switching it up and taking it back to the basics. I'm a socialist trying to grapple with our world by reflecting on it through art, theory, and the will of the people. So, what other pop culture are you getting into these days?
I've watched 3 genre fair films that none of them I thought were like great, but I had fun watching all 3. And I'll start with Alien Romulus, which was the closest to being great, I feel. It has some really fucking cool set pieces, like all the little face huggers, like where they all pop out and there's like face huggers just flying around. I was trying to think, is there another movie where we've seen that many face huggers at once in the Aliens?
Maybe I'm trying to think if in like Aliens when there's the field of eggs from the alien queen.
If we see any of them from there, yeah.
Yeah, but we don't see them like popping off in the same way where they're all bursting from
and like really
the eggs.
grody scenes where like they start to put their like whatever it is down people's mouths and they're like
yeah, when I saw some
gross.
I'm trying to do this last where I'm like mad at someone on the internet who says something dumb, but I saw someone say in response to this movie the opening weekend, it's not even Freudian, like it's totally given up like the Freudian bent of the series. And I'm like, did we miss where a man shoved a laser gun into a vagina and then it destroyed him?
Oh yeah.
Or where we see a very penile protrusion from the face hugger.
Oh yeah.
Gagging. Like I'm not saying that this is the most like theoretically crisp movie of the series. But it's there. I feel like it's playing some Freudian games.
You weren't looking hard enough.
Yeah.
But my favorite one was the sequence towards the end where they like have to get through a gauntlet of aliens, but they can't shoot them because their blood will like melt through the space station. So they turn on the anti-gravity thing and then shoot them all so their acid blood is just floating and then they have to navigate through that, which was really cool. And I love how she shoots her gun. I think that's the most like innovative
scene and use of like the mechanics in the alien universe.
Yeah, it was cool.
It was inventive.
It was cool. Now, the thing that I hated was the Uncanny Valley Ian Holm. Just unnecessary, honestly. Like, I don't know. If anyone hasn't seen it, Ian Holm, who's in the original Alien as
Science Officer Rook.
Oh, and I thought in the original one his name's different. Isn't it like shit? Because I was just reading a thing on it and I isn't it like fuck. Oh boy, this is gonna be Ash.
Yes.
Yeah. And because he is like I was reading
Science
why
Officer Rook.
Yeah, he's like the same model but a different name, which is silly. Like okay, so the issue that I'm mad at is that this man died several years ago, and he is in the movie, kind of, in that it is a like complete AI rendering of the actor Ian Holm, which I think is like fucked up in general, anyways. Because like that, like let a dead man be a dead man.
I agree.
But also like it looks shitty. Like it doesn't look good at all. And like the very nature of that character is that it's an android and can literally be anybody or anything, I feel like.
Yeah, and also it very clearly is intended to be fan service,
and it's not earned.
And it fails because part of what makes Wayland Yutani such a the corporation, right, that is either directly or indirectly the villain, aside from the xenomorphs, right, throughout the whole series, is that they are like, it doesn't matter who is the stand-in for them.
Right, yeah.
They're a faceless corporation that has synthetic humans doing their business.
Yeah.
So it really could have been any
Joe Schmo, especially because like
anyone.
a major plot point is to get the chip out of his head and put it in a different guy's head. So it's like you didn't even need the like. It could have just been a dead guy, honestly.
Right.
But yeah, I really that just left a bad taste in my mouth. But I did like it quite a bit. So then last night I did a little double feature, and I saw Trap, the M. Night Shyamalan movie. Shyamalan. I say it. I can't remember who made a joke one time and said it like that in like Parks and Rec. Maybe Parks. Anyways, I say it like that all the time. But the new M. Night Shyamalan
real
movie,
North Florida,
Shyamalan, is ridiculous. Have you seen it?
I have not.
It is so goddamn goofy. And I kind of liked it. Like, Josh Hartnett is really creepy and fun in it. Like, just a real, like, he's just like, he's meant to be like a genius level serial killer where he's just can talk his way or get his way out of anything. So the whole thing is just him like calmly, trying to
escape the trap.
Yeah, basically. And Alison Pill is in it. And
I do love her.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the performances that maybe weren't so great in a minute, but she is not in it for very long, but fucking
Isn't she the wife?
Crushes it. Yes. Yeah. She crushes it. She's weird in a way that is all Alison Pill bringing the weirdness. Like, that the whole time, I'm not going to say whether she is or isn't, but the whole time you're like, is this person on the level the way we think she is, or is she not? And I think that is all in Alison Pill being Alison Pill and then giving a great performance. Now, a couple of yays. One are those two. Also, M. Night seems like a really good dad. He put his daughter in like what turns out to be kind of a co-starring role. But also one of my boos is that I don't think she was ready to be in a co-starring role. She has a hard time in some of the more tense scenes, I feel like. She's like wooden.
Well, it's also hard when you're up against like Josh Hartnett. Like,
and
if you're not like, she is a musician, right? She is not primarily an actor. And I think being put in a like co-starring role up against someone who is very adept, and you're not going to be the greatest foil.
And she has a really tough thing to do in it, which is she like learns some information that she's like trying to not let on that she knows, but be normal at the same time. So like this character is having to do a thing where they're pretending to go about their like every day, but also in this like constant state of panic, knowing that they know something that everyone else doesn't. And
you're acting someone who is acting.
And she's and it is it's a tonal it's kind of a mess tonally. Hey, this is Craig from the editing room floor. Unfortunately, we had a bit of a snafu, a technical snafu, and for the next couple minutes, my mic cuts out and it recorded through howls. So my audio is going to sound a little wonky for a couple minutes, but it's like 6 or 7 minutes, and then it goes right back to those beautiful dulcet tones you're used to. Towns? Tones. You know what? Just... it'll be okay. But yeah, the thing that I think that makes Trap like kind of the most ridiculous, that like it was kind of annoying me at the beginning, and then I'm just like, well, this is fun to see how long they can keep this up, is like he comes up with like all these harebrained schemes to escape.
Oh, I love a harebrained scheme.
You never see it. It's just like, what if I did this and this and this, and then boop, he's done it and on to the next day. So like one of my favorites is there's a scene where like E is just swarmed with people, and he's gonna get into a vehicle and pose as the like driver of the vehicle. How in the world you'd get through like 100 people and then do this? Like the scene is set up and like, oh, there's no way, and then like you hear like a struggle, and then he's just in the car and they're driving, and it's like it's just so weird the amount of times he's like, I got a plan, and then it just hard cut to plan succeed.
Yeah, that's really interesting filmmaking of like the actual machinations of the plan are not essential. It's simply about the propelling the plot, obviously, but doing so with like this very clear characterization, which is just like the man makes it happen. Like how he makes it happen is not totally relevant.
Because the character is supposed to be this guy who can like just he will like fight tooth and nail to do whatever he
but
needs
like
to.
The parsimony of that, of just saying like, I don't need to show you every aspect to accomplish the characterization.
It is like kind of frustrating at the beginning, and then by the end you're just like, let's roll with it, baby. We're just going. I
just saw one of your notes for the next movie. Sorry about it. A little foreshadowing laugh.
Long Legs, Oz Perkins.
Yes. Oz. Yeah.
Oz.
Osgood, and he goes by Oz. Yeah.
Okay. Like a really creepy, atmospheric serial killer movie. I was digging the shit out of this, and then I think the ending is just kind of a dud.
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
Clearly building to something, and I remember thinking, oh, this isn't going to pay off, because I paused the movie and saw there was 20 minutes left, and I was like, well, we haven't uncovered what this is at all. And then the like, what is going on is so rushed and forced that I was like, oh god. The one time when I think a movie could have used another 20 minutes or something to get to the...
I personally feel that the uncovering is its undoing. Like, regardless of, I think that the mystery should be maintained. I think the explanation...
expository, like, just...
Well, I think, for me, if he had simply not had her doing voiceover over the final scene and instead went with some really foreboding atmospheric sound, everything that is said in the voiceover would be communicated visually. We understand that her mother played a role and that there was a Faustian bargain made for her soul. And if you just let it remain in the realm of haunting mystery, I think it would have been a really effective movie.
Like some of the explanations, it goes from like being like kind of grounded in reality, and then the explanation is so like ham-fisted and thrown out there. You're like, huh? Like, just like make it mysterious,
right? It just make it mysterious. I thought a lot when I saw it, the movie, and it was partly because we had watched it not so distantly in the past, but I was reminded of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Not because the movies are alike really in any ways, but because I feel like Invasion of the Body Snatchers does such a good job of provides a little bit of explanation, and then the absence of explanation, of oral explanation, and just compelling visual storytelling intention allows you to fill in the gaps and also to use your imagination to build up the fear. And I just wanted, I mean, it's not fair to compare to maybe one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies ever made, but like I was thinking about that a lot when I saw it for that reason.
Because it is that movie for like 80%.
Yeah.
And then at the end they're just like,
no, I legit was like experiencing physiological anxiety while watching it, and then that shit started happening, and I was like, well, I guess thanks for like grounding me.
It almost just like it makes the like scary thing less scary.
Yeah.
To have that much like explained in it.
It's like if you're in a haunted house and like something leaps out and frightens you, and then someone turns on all of the lights is like what happened. You're like, oh, that was rubber. Got it. So, yeah. So please say the thing.
It's really weird in it, and I like it. And my wife and I were trying to figure out why he looked familiar, and then I realized, and to my credit, my wife was like, yes, but he looks like Miss Piggy. Craig again from the editing room floor, and this time it's all vanity, baby, because I made a funny joke there and my audio was messed up, so you could not hear it, but also I think it's extremely true, and I want to share this with the world, that in the new horror movie Long Legs, directed by Osgood Perkins, it features Nick Cage in a lot of prosthetics, and he looks like Miss Piggy from the Muppets. So that's what I said there that we're talking about, and you should go look and see how much he does look like Miss Piggy in this movie. Okay, thanks. Bye. Prosthetic makeup and
the voice, too. Yeah.
Every time we pop up. But I love Nick Cage being weird and unhinged, and this is that. Maybe not one of my favorites of Nick Cage being weird and unhinged, which I will say is a more recent one. Let's see if you can guess it. My favorite recent Nick Cage performance.
Is it Mandy?
No, but I do like that one. And I like Willy's Wonderland, but it's not that one. It's the movie Mom and Dad.
Oh, yes, with Selma Blair, right?
He is a fucking crazy in it. I specifically love the scene where he destroys a pool table while singing the Hokey Pokey, which doesn't really have anything to do with the plot. I just really like
Goddess bless Nick Cage.
What about you? What you been watching?
Well, as we've talked about on a couple of the previous episodes of Ye Old Podcast, this past weekend was the Tallahassee Film Fest. So I went to the Tallahassee Film Fest, and I saw several features and then one collection of shorts. Of the features I saw Welcome Space Brothers, I saw Sam's World, Beautiful Friend, and the 4K restoration of Paris, Texas. So some highlights for me and then one low light. So the two highlights. One, Welcome Space Brothers was fucking great. It is a documentary about a cult or new religious movement, depending on your preference, that is ostensibly centered around UFOs and aliens out there, but really is a cult of personality around this particular woman, Ruth Norman, who goes by Uriel. She's an archangel. So one, I had an opportunity to. So, Welcome Space Brothers. One, I had an opportunity to meet the documentarian, the filmmaker Jody Will, who actually just moved to Tallahassee. Interesting.
Oh.
And some of her other work is also about a new religious movement. So it's a kind of common theme for her, focusing on subcultures. But thinking about the documentary itself, I think a lot of times coverage of new religious movements tends to take a true crime framing, right? Where it's kind of uncovering the dark perversions. Yeah. There is a little bit of that. It's not, not environment free of distortion and critique, but in general, that's not its focus. Instead, it really is about, interestingly, this woman who, Ruth Norman, who I can only describe as a straight woman drag queen.
Okay.
Who is constantly wearing opulent, flamboyant outfits that are batshit insane.
Cool.
And surrounded by young men who are varying degrees of gay.
Okay.
And how she created an environment for these young men and also women, all of her followers, to engage in acts of collective creation. So they made all these movies together about their cosmology and defining what they believed, but representing it pictorially. So they have all these beliefs about there's 33 planets and each of those planets has a leader, and these planets, basically there's a United Nation confederation of these planets. And so they made dozens of movies reenacting these things and reenacting what they believe to be their past lives. And the movie is full of archival footage that they dug through. So it's quite a feat that they're able to leverage all of this backlog of a video from the religious movement, but also it just makes it so much more special than being about the ways in which they wronged each other or were isolated from the outside world. Instead, it's this guy loved filmmaking and became a filmmaker for it. Or, this other man loved to choreograph dances. And so he choreographed everything. So there's these wonderful bursts of collective creation. And then I also just really enjoy a focus on new religious movements that are trying so hard to reconcile this kind of Weberian contradiction between the new knowledge that rationalization, like the process of rationalization over life, reveals, while also facing the anxiety, fear, and kind of panic of the loss of wonderment and faith that that rationalization also brings. And so a lot of these new religious movements, what they do to try and resolve this contradiction is like create a religion that they call a science.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, oh, we still have faith. We still believe there's wonder in the world. But the way we understand and define our faith is through some kind of like scientific method or procedure. Yeah, it just is everything. It's like glittery. There's like beautiful ambient harp music playing. It really felt like it was descended from
that's cool. And
a UFO for me.
Hell yeah. And it's cool to watch a cult movie that's not about like a terrible crime that happened or
right,
something.
It's not about a murder.
Yeah. I was trying to think of any other cult movie or any other cult in general that
and again,
CrossFit, does that count?
That's not to say, well, I don't know. There was that guy that just drowned during a CrossFit competition.
What? He drowned at a CrossFit competition?
Yes, they didn't have like judges stationed. Like they didn't have, not judges, what am I trying to say? Lifeguards.
Yeah.
They didn't have lifeguards stationed like in the water.
I didn't even know you're in the water at a CrossFit competition.
Yeah, there was like a triathlon aspect to it. That happened couple months ago.
Damn, what a bummer.
Month or two ago. But yeah, and I do want to make it clear, like there's still like power dynamics at play, right?
Yeah,
Anytime you have like like the ascension of charismatic leadership, which we're going to talk a decent amount about in a little bit when we talk about Mussolini. But she's no Mussolini, but Uriel definitely is exploiting people's labor and money, right, and attention to further her own ends. So I'm not trying to say like, oh, this totally pure angelic woman, but it's much more complex than villainy, and I enjoyed it for that.
Cool.
Then my other main highlight, I would say, is seeing the Paris, Texas new 4K restoration on IMAX. Just being able to see these like sweeping, Texas or LA landscapes on the hill when, Harry Dean Stanton's character is like in LA with his brother's family. Just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Just absolutely beautiful. And if you see me around town with a bob, just know I had this appointment scheduled before I saw this movie.
Damn.
It's not because of Paris, Texas.
Get the Kinski bob.
But man, Mike, my husband, listeners, learned that she is Kinski's daughter like immediately after the movie.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Like, I guess he, watched it and was like, interesting, last name, and then looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah. I don't know much about her. Is she Cuckoo Bird too?
No, in fact, maybe. She very publicly like renounced him and accused him of abusing her.
Damn.
So she was definitely a victim of his targeting and insanity herself.
Yeah. It seems like everyone in
was.
that guy's orbit.
Yeah, everyone was. Yeah. And so if you were in his intimate circle, I'm sure that was only magnified.
Yeah.
But I actually, I'm going to confess this, had never seen the movie before.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
I heard like neo-Western. I was like, I don't know about all that. But I'm not going to turn down the opportunity to see it on IMAX. And it was gorgeous. I do love a romance or a film that has romantic elements that are dramatic rather than, or even melodramatic. Like, that very much appeals to me. So I really enjoyed it.
Have you ever seen The Straight Story? The David Lynch movie?
Sorry. Yes, I have.
Yeah,
about the
Farnsworth on a tractor.
The tractor.
I feel like those movies are akin to each other in a way, but they both have Harry Dean Stanton in them. But they also like both. I don't know. They create similar feelings for me of like, trying to right your past wrongs and make amends, and like you're gonna go to great lengths. You're doing something that is like seemingly ridiculous to make amends for the past, or to like some of for certain
some of the meaningful straight yearning tales, right? I think generally queer people do yearning better than straight people do, but great example, both of those great examples of straight people yearning for things. I will say one of my big takeaways from Paris, Texas was just like how much it reminded me of Lynch's filmmaking.
Oh yeah, okay.
In general, because of it's not surreal, but there are so many gaps in our understanding, and there are things that if amped up even just slightly would verge on the hyper real or unreal. So I feel
like the meetings in the little room, what do we call it, are very like red roomy adjacent and Lynchian. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you liked it because I love that movie.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. So do we want to move on to talking about a current event?
Sure. Current events. What's going on in the world that's either got you celebrating or in despair?
So we can keep this kind of brief. I just wanted to raise this story because one, wow, and two, because it revisits some themes that we have touched on repeatedly before, like when I've talked about the Jakarta method, or when we've brought up the U.S.'s violent intervention and meddling to influence geopolitical arrangements, and the ways in which, like, even the appearance of democracy is for we and not thee, and that these are not tales left to the 20th century. I think sometimes we talk about, like, that's what the CIA was doing in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
No. This is SOP here.
This is right now. Yeah, exactly. And so last week, The Intercept and Dropsite News reported that text messages exchanged by the Ecuadorian Attorney General, Diana Salazar, show that Salazar helped engineer a campaign blaming the leftist party for the assassination of political candidate Fernando Villavicencio, whom the text messages also reveal to have been a U.S. informant, in August 2023, when she, being Salazar, the Attorney General, due to her investigatory role, knew, in fact, that the killing was attributed to a cartel, or was attributable, rather, to a cartel. So there's just, like, several layers here, but that, the U.S. was connected to a political candidate that was positioned himself very much as running against the left, and that candidate was killed, and they being U.S. interests and Ecuadorian interests that are aligned with U.S. interests, view it as an opportunity to drive a wedge and blame leftists, even when leftists are not involved
at all. Yeah. Huh.
So good stuff. Good shit. Just keeps rolling out.
Well, let me ask you. Speaking of current events, this could be mine. So, any takeaways from the DNC? Did you watch any of it?
I did.
I did watch very little, except for the speeches. I don't know. Anything hilarious or insightful to take away?
I mean, I think a lot of it is what we would anticipate.
Yeah.
A lot of it is politics by focus group, which is Democrats love to do. I think the thing that surprised me is how much juice it had. Like, I think there was a lot of spirit infused in it, and it seemed really keyed up to activate people's emotions, which I think that sometimes the Democrats don't seem terribly interested in strategically playing that game.
Yeah.
And I think they decided to play ball. So that was interesting to me. How about you?
Well, you know me. I got that interest in the ding-dongs that show up. So there was a few...
How about that sheriff? You see that sheriff?
No. Arpaio?
No. Oh, Jesus. You think they... They invited...
not as an invite, because the guys I'm going to talk about were like infiltrators.
Oh, no. There's a sheriff from Wisconsin, maybe, who is like... they invited to speak because he's the sheriff of Flint, Michigan. That's what it is. I just remembered. Sorry. He and they invited him to speak because he, during some Black Lives Matter protests, like marched side by side.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
But he spoke like he was on cocaine.
Cool.
And his gesticulations were
that's awesome.
deranged. And all I could focus on when he was talking.
Oh, I'm
so
gonna
I
watch
thought
that.
maybe
Hell
but
yeah.
okay. Infiltrators. Tell me about the infiltrators.
Okay, so well, your normal crew was there, like Charlie Kirk and those idiots. My favorite one.
I'm surprised he got through. You could see that forehead anywhere.
Oh my god, that tiny
blockhead?
little face. Yeah, the tiny little face on that big old
blockhead.
blockhead. But my favorite one, because of how desperate it was did you see what Matt Walsh was doing there?
I did not.
Okay, so Matt Walsh has a movie coming out called Am I Racist?
Yes.
Movie over.
Never ask a question that the answer is extremely obvious.
Where like he thinks, I think after this last like anti-trans movie, he thinks he's like Borat, and he's like doing all these like setting these things up where he is just like getting together like focus groups that they put together and then being like just like fucking with them, but he's not funny at all. So it's just basically like he gets them together and he's like, I don't know that he says this is my example. He's like, what if I say the N-word to you guys? Like, it's like that, like
that level.
It's that level, yeah.
I think you're right. He is Borat, not Sacha Baron Cohen.
Right. Yes, exactly. He is. Yeah. But okay, so the movie, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe in the movie he is adopting this like lib character. If you've seen Lady Ballers, it's the same thing he does in Lady Ballers.
Yes,
it's the same wig.
Lady Ballers.
He's in Lady Ballers as a lib, like a hippie crunchy lib, and he's literally wearing the same wig and like looks like some of the same outfits. But he is not funny at all and has no idea of what to do with these. He just knows like, oh, comedians have gone to these before. I don't even think he interviews anybody, but there's several times where he just wanders behind like CNN panels that are talking. Like clearly he's just trying to be on camera, not doing anything. Like it's supposed to just be funny. Like you can see him clearly just be like, just looking, and it just the desperation was I loved it. Just the like no bits. No, the wig is the bit.
He's just play acting as a giraffe, basically.
Yeah, just kind of. Yeah, he's just a confused giraffe. Yes.
In the background.
And then my other favorite one who showed up, because this guy fucking sucks. I dislike this guy in a different way than the rest of them. But are you know of Jimmy Dore?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I used to listen to some like comedy podcasts that started in the mid 2000s, and he was a frequent guest, and I never thought he was like particularly funny or anything, but I didn't think he was nuts and craven and a weirdo. But he spent a lot of it like just walking through Chicago, just be like, look what the Democrats have done. And he's just on a street where nothing's happening, which I found really funny. Of like, I've been doing all these scaremongering tactics. Let me try to bring it to life, whether it is actually true or not.
Like
but
I thought someone was gonna come out and shoot him.
Yeah. Or just like, look at it. Just look at this. And I was like, it's a big fucking city, dude. You're just walking down like.
He's acting like Rorschach.
Yeah. I'm not in here with you. You're in here with me. He's also like one of the most annoying. Like aside from his politics, just his like humor is not funny at all.
Yeah, big case of annoying voice too.
Annoying fucking voice. That might be the Chicago in him. But do we want to talk about our movie?
Yeah, you want to give a little overview of or a reminder about our current series?
Most definitely. Okay, so for our series here, we are in our second episode of Italian filmmakers depicting fascism. Last episode, we discussed The Damned by Luchino Visconti, and in this episode, we are going to talk about The Conformist by Bernardo Bertolucci. Is it just Bernardo or Bernard?
Bernardo
There's Bertolucci.
No there.
In each instance, each film, we will talk about, 1, the historical context for the period depicted within the film. 2, what does the movie communicate about what fascism is? Or stated another way, how does this movie define fascism? And how is a power pattern under fascism? And 3, disentangle themes of gender, sex, and sexuality with regards to fascism. Throughout these 3 episodes of our discussion of these themes and motifs, they may be highly structured or may loosely flow from our review of the film.
All right, let's get into some of that historical context.
We love it.
Not fascism, to be clear, just history.
Yes,
The study of history. So, though upper echelon fascists are not depicted in The Conformist, and interestingly, are barely mentioned, always distilled through bureaucratic orders and layers of managers, we want to start by reviewing some historical background. We haven't really discussed Italian fascism much on the pod before, so we want to have a shared understanding of the world we're entering and how Mussolini rose to power. Please check out our sources listing to learn more. Now, a former journalist, Mussolini displayed a charismatic model of leadership through his strong oratory skills and media adeptness. Following disastrous electoral losses to the socialists in 1919, Mussolini and his followers hammered out a new path to domination, the squadrismo. Okay, pretend I don't speak Italian.
AOC in them.
I'm trying. Yeah, close no cigar, or close lots of cigars here, rather. The squadrismo tactic, in which black shirt gangs would harass and beat individuals while destroying newspapers and book presses, socialist meeting spaces, employment offices, co-ops, socialist clubs, and cultural organizations.
They paired force against citizenry while making deals with centrist politicians and landowners. These squads became installed side by side with the local government. Cops and armies even let them gear... Cops and the army. 35. Oh my god. There's going to be so much to edit on this one. I fucked up. 6 ways from the weekend. Okay. Cops in the army even lent them gear and trucks, while some moonlighted in their expeditions because the fascists were viewed as accomplices in the fight against the socialists. Fascist collaborators with the landowners... Oops, fuck me. God damn. Fascists collaborated with the landowners to undermine socialist reforms, too. When the socialists had created labor exchanges that served to organize workers to fight for stronger wages and strike, the fascists gave those same landless laborers small plots of land that had been given to them to distribute by the landowners. This undercut socialists' immediate victories and drew peasants away from the dream of collectivized farms. In 1921, as these squads terrorized the Po Valley, Veneto, Tuscany, Emilia, and other agrarian regions, or places where workers' power had been felt, Mussolini created the National Fascist Party. By 1922, the king made Mussolini prime minister, and his black shirts marched on Rome. He would remain in power for over 20 years until he was deposed in July 1943, following a year-and-a-half-long civil war.
Side note, where have we heard of this uneasy alliance between political and economic elites with fascists against the socialists before? Well, in this very series, it's really similar to a sentiment expressed at the beginning of The Damned. Working with fascists is perhaps the ultimate earthly Faustian bargain. And another side note. Sometimes you hear that Italian fascists, even Mussolini himself, had some sort of leftist origin story. The earliest fascists in Italy were anti-bourgeois nationalists. But the class nature of this struggle, as opposed to the nationalist nature, rapidly transformed. As the squad's extra-legal power grew, the composition of the squads shifted away from a movement of purist ideologues to the sons of landowners. During this transition and rise to power, the fascists started to reject post-World War I pacifism, re-embraced imperialism, and turned away from unions, nationalization processes, i.e. state ownership of industry, and heavy taxes on the rich. Some scholars have argued that Italian fascism was the byproduct of an alliance between the agrarian elites and the industrial elites during a period of societal transition where proletariat revolution seemed not just possible but imminent. Regardless of some of their very early on affiliations, Mussolini and his cadres repressed socialists and were aligned with and furthered the purposes of the bourgeois. When we come upon 1930s Italy and The Conformist, the film we take as our focus today, the fascist apparatus has fully integrated into the formal system, but its street expressions still linger. Moreover, its antipathy for the socialists seethe openly. Now, let's talk about how this movie defines fascism. So how does Bertolucci define fascism here? Or rather, what characteristics of fascism are made most prominent or proffered as explanation in The Conformist? We see a few themes. Let's do a brief overview and then kind of plan to revisit as we work our way through the narrative. 1, Bertolucci is definitely flirting with Freud here.
Unlike the stupid Alien movie. Call back to earlier in the episode where my mic may or may not have been working all the way. So
we love a callback that may or may not be a callback. Bertolucci ties together familial dysfunction, both maternal and paternal failures and neuroses are depicted here, sexual repression, and fascism. Shame, fragmented bonds, frustrated desires, and violation imprint upon our main character's psyche and propel him to assimilate at all costs. 2, we see fascism is about taking action and executing without reservation. Most importantly, that action is non-deliberative, anti-consensus building, and the perversion of democracy, where the crowd is always instrumental but not agental. It doesn't have a mind of its own. Instead of democratic process, as Paxson says in his 2004 book, The Anatomy of Fascism, politics is carried out via non-politics. We spend very little time in governmental buildings in The Conformist, but there is no doubt that our main character's behavior has political implications. And third, it reminds me, as I noted at the end of the previous episode, of Erich Fromm's 1941 book, Escape from Freedom. Fromm writes in that book's foreword, and I quote, "Freedom, though it has brought him independence and rationality, has made him isolated and thereby anxious and powerless." In Fromm's revisionist Freudism, the individuation that occurs both on a micro-psychological and macro-structural level under modernity is frighteningly isolating for the individual. Freedom has a dialectical quality, and it generates unconscious motivations. In a quest to prevent aloneness, some societies pathologically mutate to eliminate the self. Fascism. C. John Delagu helpfully summarizes this in his book, Fascism, Vulnerability, and Escape from Freedom, Readings to Repair Democracy, page 23. And I quote, "Vulnerability causes freedom to be perceived as something negative and threatening, leading to the surrender of selfhood and personal sovereignty. Authoritarianism, destructiveness, and automaton conformity are the mechanisms by which one is relieved of freedom's duties and relinquish the commitments of the Enlightenment that mark both Marxism and classical liberalism in favor of a fascism that promises a full incorporation, an absorption, an assimilation. Choice and risk, when seen only as peril, are traded away for a kind of modern feudalism. As we move through the movie, watch as Marcelo balks at his own liberty."
Based on the 1951 novel of the same name by Alberto Moravia, The Conformist is Bernardo Bertolucci's fourth full-length feature. Bertolucci is perhaps best known for writing Once Upon a Time in the West and directing Last Tango in Paris, The Last Emperor, and a mainstay of Hal's teenage years, The Dreamers, which I've never seen. But many of his works speak to the political milieu of his homeland. The Conformist is about Marcello Clerici, an educated civil servant who becomes a fascist flunky as we see him struggling to connect with his repressed queer desires, his morphine-addicted mother, his vacuous wife, a former professor who offers a socialist off-ramp, and even with other fascists. Acquiescence is the name of his game. So,
It's okay.
yeah.
What's your initial reaction? This is the first time you've seen this movie?
Yes. This is the first time I've seen any Bertolucci movie, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I haven't seen Last Tango in Paris or The Last Emperor. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I will say, like, I don't know why this made me feel like this, because The Damned isn't necessarily warm and fuzzy, but, like, this one is more sterile and, like, at a distance. I think that's by design, obviously. The lead is a little weenie, and so sometimes it's hard to, latch on to him. But it feels like the thing that struck me the most is how relevant it feels now in describing, like, as mentioned before, I do follow a lot of, right-wing ding-dongs, and so the whole time I was watching this, I was like, oh, that's an aspect of this guy, this right-wing idiot. Like, specifically, I'm thinking, like, the Proud Boys. Do you know who Nick Fuentes is?
Yes.
Yeah, his little group of groypers, but all, like, the part that you said in the intro about, like, isolation and anxiety and, like, feeling like and those feelings like morphing you into having to feel like you need a purpose regardless of what that is, I think really, really translate in this. Like the false bravado of like the scene where he immediately starts acting like a Charlie's Angel when he gets handed the pistol, which I thought was great. I love that. And from the like repressed sexuality used as a cudgel, it's really applicable to a lot of different angles of the current crop of fascist morons that we see in America, at least. Really, like you could apply this guy and make a movie that about a Gamergate guy or one of the Groypers. And I think that makes sense because by definition, fascism is a return to like a violent return to tradition. So of course, all these like paths to fascism all kind of look the same. And it's, you know, a story told in a...
Right. They feel reiterative.
Yeah. What about you? What do you think of it?
I love this movie.
Uh-huh.
I think that, you know, kind of similar to The Damned, it's one of those movies that the first time I saw it, I was totally blown away by the filmmaking.
Oh, it is fucking gorgeous.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And the directing is just really helps this movie become transcendent. Like,
yeah.
Takes something that could have been kind of a cast off and really propels it into interesting dynamic art. And yeah, I do think focusing on the psychology of fascism, which film I think is particularly well suited to delve into. You know, it can be complex to try and portray historical conditions and trajectories of historical development, but you can capture someone's mindset more clearly through this modality. On this viewing, a few things stuck out to me. One, just how intensely Freudian the logic of the chain of actions of this movie are. You know, it's very focused on like memory, both individual and collective, developmental and psychological trajectories stemming from early interpersonal settings. And then also how funny and kind of absurdist this movie is stuck out to me a lot more than on previous viewings. And in fact, kind of as a corollary, it really reminded me of, or like I guess inverse, you know, whatever the movie I'm about to say reminded me of it. But how much it reminded me of The Death of Stalin.
Yeah.
That some of that like circling the drain in bureaucratic settings and violence that has significant impact but is treated as banal. I just have to think that Iannucci, like, you know, this was percolating somewhere in the back of his brain when he watched it.
Yeah. Would you want to dive into the narrative and what happens in the movie?
Yes.
You ready? Let's do it. So the movie begins. We see our protagonist, who is, like I said, a real weenie of a guy. Just a shit. Like, not a lot of redeeming qualities to him. But we see it opens up with him in a hotel room, which at first I thought was his wife next to him. And no, he has been with another man we see in the bed, which will come up later, and he is called in to come into I don't even know, do they give a name to whatever they're calling it? To
report to like the local fascist station.
The fascist department. Yeah. We should also say that the movie has a very like chopped up structure as far as time goes. Like there's a main narrative we see, but a lot of our backstory is just sprinkled in kind of with no pomp or circumstance. You're just gonna like, it
just kind of thrusts you
so there are a few like
again those memories, right? The intrusion of memories. And
one of the first ones we see is him with a friend of his who is this blind man named Italo, who they are watching a radio program, is that the right word for it? Yeah, they're singing, but they're also like dancing and doing all that stuff.
It's being
Yeah,
broadcast.
they're watching it being broadcast. And
another point that reminded me of the death
oh,
of Stalin.
the Death of Stalin, which is also where it starts with, oh, you look at that.
Yeah.
And the same setup of like them on one side of the glass and the radio performers or the opera on the other too. But I can tell you've got a little soft spot for Italo. Do you want to talk about Italo in these scenes?
I love him. My favorite scene in the whole movie centers around him.
Sorry.
My favorite scene in the whole movie centers around him. But I think that, there's an obvious metaphor being made with Italio's blindness or visual impairment, where in some ways, like, he is the only person that truly sees. Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Yeah.
Marcello.
Yeah.
And so, there's this real, like, homosocial or possibly homosexual grief that Italio expresses in this scene. That's when we learn that Marcello is getting married. And Italio says that I'm losing my best friend as a consequence of this, and then goes on to kind of talk about the increasingly anti-parliamentarian and anti-democratic direction of Italy and Germany. And so we see that Marcello is like kind of starting to increasingly separate from the recent past, right? Like, he is transitioning away from people that he had close bonds with, and that there is something afoot in the broader milieu as well.
Yeah. I also think it helps as a, like, to reiterate the, like, the eugenics side of fascism, of that, like, Italo represents a weak version of a man to him because he's blind, because he has this disability. So that's kind of his initial jumping off point of wanting to be normal, which becomes a kind of a runner throughout, is him just like desperate to be perceived as a normal guy.
Oh yeah, all he wants to do is be normal.
Which, like, if you are that, like, there's no way you're ever gonna be with that, like, mentality. It's like, yeah. I also find it interesting, like, Italo is the only one that seems like their relationship seems pure to a degree between them, where, like, everyone else is almost using.
Right, it doesn't feel as
other,
transactional.
right? Like,
there
even with his wife,
genuine
which
connection.
is
part of why I think increasingly pushes him
away. Yeah, because
right?
he reminds him of the, like, guy he once was or whatever, or the
Or he doesn't want to be. And then we see from there that Marcello is the brief glimpse we have of some of these governmental buildings,
which we're gonna talk about that in a second. But
some of the most beautiful
cool
shots. There's just like these wide open.
What is that fucking building, by the way? Is that like a real place? Was that constructed for this movie?
I don't know. There's just like people carrying statues.
In and out, which I thought was like
of frame. It's gorgeous. It's nonsense how beautiful it is.
That's a great shot. The like cross at the same time.
Yes.
One going this way, the other one going that way.
Right. Someone's holding an
Some
eagle.
good fellas.
And then then there's one point in time where, because he's just like, Marcello is just like wandering through these buildings, trying to get to the meeting that he has set up to talk about how he's going to contribute to the fascists. And he kind of like peeks behind a curtain, and then there's like this quick pan out that just like, zooms in it, then it's wide frame all of a sudden. And it's here that we learn that Marcello, and we get like a little bits of this during the phone call, but that Marcello has proposed voluntarily a plan to repress anti-fascism, that he is volunteering to kill one of his former professors who is a socialist or is a socialist organizer, and that these fascists are like frothing at the mouth for him to do this, but they also seem to question his motivations, because they say, you're confusing. You're not a pure ideologue. You're not someone who's driven by like the love for fascism.
Right.
You're not driven by money. You're not driven by fear. We don't like comprehend you. Right. And there's lots of, in this part, themes of mirrors and masks and hiding. Like, he peeks out behind the curtain. He's looking at himself in mirrors. And Marcello recites in this part a little bit of poetry that comes from some writing that is attributed to the Emperor Hadrian. I am not going to attempt to say the Latin because I cannot.
It's Vini Vidi Vici.
Yeah. But it is not Vidi Vidi Vici if you've not seen this movie. But it translates to, little soul, you charming little wanderer, my body's guest and partner. Where are you off to now? So at this point in time, we then transition to see that Marcello is preparing to become heterosexual.
Damn.
Capital H heterosexual.
He is not great at it.
Yeah, he's not good
at it.
And we see the origins of his problems at the hands of his heterosexual parents and his homosexual chauffeur. You want to lead in there? He
got, he's a shit, but man, did he get dealt a brutal hand because both of his parents are
so his
unwell.
What do we see of his mom?
She is... emotionally, she is vacant for sure, and she's addicted to morphine, and that is kind of her existence. Is
and
just
she's buried in wiener dogs.
That was great.
What we see her. Yeah. She's in bed. She's wearing a flowing gauzy robe, and her makeup is she looks like a Beale sister, little Edie.
I was thinking Norma Desmond,
yes.
fascist Norma Desmond.
Yes, decadent and obsessed with her dogs and
drunk
makeup and morphine.
Yeah.
And then and I think notably, it's important, she is in a mansion that is just decrepit, covered in leaves and ivy.
Exact opposite of the building we see that is austere and huge, and
right.
This one is just a fucking shit show. I mean, it's big, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's two other important things here. One, on a filmmaking level, there are a lot of shots internal to the house that we can see through walls, basically. And I like that probing, piercing effect that it has, right? There is no place that is not the camera's purview, that is not all is penetrated, basically.
And metaphorically, I feel like it is there is no hiding place for him. The people close to him, even though their relationship's terrible, are always going to see through whatever this front is that he's putting on for himself.
Right.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think is relevant here is we see the first act of fascist violence.
Yeah.
Where there's a special agent, Manganiello, I think is how you say his name.
Yeah.
And Marcello sicks him on the mother chauffeur, who's a different person from the chauffeur that assaults him, because he accuses him of selling his mother drugs.
Yes. And are they in some sort of... They're in some sort of relationship beyond chauffeur, right? Is that implied?
That's implied.
Yeah.
Or rather, it's accused, should say. Now,
because that's more what I took for why he sicked him on him. Is there some Freudian thing there about the chauffeur being in a relationship with the mom, a possibly sexual relationship with the mom, and whether or not what happened with him is true or not. The impetus for him sicking the guy on there was more of the hey, go beat up that guy that's banging my mom type thing.
Right, defense of mother through violence.
Or defense of your own ego, because you're this guy's not going to be having sex with my mom.
Defense of mother as stand-in for defense of self.
Right, yeah.
I think there's also, something that fascists were known for is... being jingoistic and xenophobic, and the chauffeur is an Asian man. Yep. So I think that probably plays in too. And then we go next to see that Marcello's father, who in a previous scene we learn has syphilis.
Yeah. And is institutionalized.
Yeah. We see him in an open air asylum. Another beautiful shots.
Yeah.
Just open air, gorgeous white marble everywhere. And And Marcello asks him about his past as a torturer. Like, Marcello's like trying to do some self-analysis, right? He's like, something is wrong and I'm going to try and get to the bottom of it. And then his dad immediately stands up and starts calling to an orderly to have his straitjacket tied and get dragged away. He's like, I choose insanity. I can't assimilate my knowledge of the evil that I've done to save you, son, right? And then we see a glimpse into the past when he goes to confession. Why does he go to confession?
He goes to confession essentially to not essentially. Well, I think originally it's like
to confess.
Isn't his wife like pressuring him something? You must go. Yeah.
And it's totally functional. It's part of why I want to talk about like why it comes out why the flashback comes out this way, is because there's this very interesting element of Italian fascism that's like using religion as a tool, but actually not being
engaging
invested
with it.
in like the spiritual universe that it offers.
It's the obsession with tradition and not necessarily looking at
and just like process and ritual, mass ritual, right? So basically Julia, his fiance, who is to be his wife, that's what fiance means if you forgot, basically says
French.
go to confession, and he's like, but I'm not religious, and she's like, nobody is, go to confession.
Yeah, I love that. That was great.
So he's at confession. What do we see there, Craig?
We see, and then we see it through a series of flashbacks, is that he was assaulted by his childhood chauffeur named Lino. First we see that he was beaten up by a gang of kids and assaulted by the gang of kids. I think we're led to believe because one of the kids says like something about get a stick, and that's not expounded on, but it seemed not great in that area. And Lino kind of like saves him or rescues him and then brings him back to just the shittiest looking apartment ever. And and he's how old is he at this age? Like 11, 12 maybe?
Yeah. 12-ish, I would say.
We see him assault him and attempt to batter him, and then he takes his gun and fires off a bunch of shots that mostly miss, but he does hit him and seemingly, as he thinks, kills Lino, and that's what he confesses to the priest, who seems more bothered by the or he does, right? Is he the one that mentions the thing? I can't remember how it goes, but Marcello
says it's almost as if the church thinks sodomy is worse than murder.
I couldn't remember if he said that or the priest, but then the priest wanted to be, yeah. Which is like, I mean, broken clock's right every once in a while, so Marcello got that one.
Yeah, he has glimpses of self-reflection, right?
Yeah, he's like a smart guy. He's the like, I think this will segue next into what we're talking about.
Before we segue, I want to say, are you familiar with Pierre Clementi, who plays Lino?
No.
He is one of my favorite. I wouldn't say he's like, I can't just say he's like straight up one of my favorite actors from the 70s, because he was in a bunch of things in small roles, but he's one of my favorite, like, that guy to show up. Yeah. Because he's in this, of the movies that I really like that he's in this. He is in Sweet Movie. He's in Belle de Jour. As the main villain. He's in Pigsty, or Porcine, which is a Pasolini film. I mean, he has like 100+ credits, but so many of them are just like great, like leftist filmmakers. He is in The Leopard, which is one of Visconti's classics. I'm just like always really happy.
Yeah, hell yeah. He's a striking looking fella too.
Yes, yeah. He's like all bones and limbs.
Yeah.
But sorry, you want to
make
a transition.
Yeah, I think what makes this guy weird ultimately and a fascist is this obsession that he has with appearing normal, appearing like a traditional guy, a traditional man in a traditional marriage, having the traditionally correct like political views, and but what he doesn't see is that is what makes him a fucking nut, and like just that reek of desperation on him. Which, by the way, like the actor, the lead actor, John Louis Trintignant. That is a tough name for my tongue to pronounce, but he is really, really great at like just grabbing that air of desperation that surrounds this character and almost like everything he says and does. And it's not like it's subtle too, where like, you know, he's not necessarily groveling all the time, but almost everything he says and does is just this desperate attempt to become to perform for the people that he's around, that he's some sort of like just normal guy.
Yeah, I think he has the kind of desperation that only someone that like veers on the sociopathic can, where there is like some degree of analysis of the outside world, but a total inability to like feel what that outside world feels. Yeah,
he's doing it because he's seen others do it, but not because he's experiencing the experience that would cause someone to behave that way.
Right. And like he can be aware enough of his mother's ills to lash out violently at what he perceives to be the cause of it, but doesn't understand how those inform his own motivations, unconscious motivations, right? I think in this like kind of last part of the confession scene, we see that he really treats normalcy as like an end, but also as a means. And he says two things that are just like the thesis statements of the movie. He says, I need to reconstruct my normalcy. And then he also says to the priest, I've already repented. I want to be forgiven by society. Right?
Yeah.
The crowd is his God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
damn.
Yeah. Then we reach, in my opinion, the singularly most beautiful scene in a movie full of masterful direction and lighting.
Can I say mine? Because yours is better, but I just want to say mine really quickly. It is the note of when he is having the conversation with someone. I'm trying to find it in my notes. I'm sorry. That he says it is shot in a way where there are two people on either side of the screen of the frame, and him in complete almost shadow. The way the light is coming through the window, it's like cutting the screen in half, like him completely in shadow, the other person completely in the light. I thought it was just striking and beautiful. Amazing. But I know you've got lots to say about this sequence. So
Italia throws a party that seems to be like almost entirely other visually impaired and or blind people, aside from Marcello.
Yeah.
The room is totally covered in streamers and lanterns that look like gems. They're just glowing so vibrantly. There's just this really gorgeous effect of exquisitely diffuse lights everywhere and just bathed in color. Feels really warm and saturated, but also kind of like a liminal space, like this ghostly other space. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I also this made me think of that, but it's almost all for him.
Yeah,
like, because he's the only one that can see it and take it in.
It's literally just visually impaired people like bumping into lanterns, right? That are like hanging from the ceiling. So we see this, it's gorgeous, and then Marcello and Italia like step off to the side and are having a private moment of conversation, and then follows my favorite scene in the film. Marcello asks him, what do you think a normal man is like? Again, one deeply not normal man speaking to another not normal man who's been cast aside by society. And Italia speaks of conformity, trust, true citizenship, brotherhood, and fascism. But then he says they too are different. Marcello and Italia are different. They are two of a kind. And then he goes to grasp for Marcello, who moves, evading him. But then right before Italia's kind of desperation and grasping into blank space builds, Marcello grabs his hand. And then the camera pans down to show that Italia is wearing mismatched shoes. they are not two of a kind. Oh, heartbreaking.
It's good.
It's
good.
like so fucking tender and cruel. Is like 20 seconds. One of my favorite like 20-30 seconds on film ever. It's just so lush and beautifully lit and just like emotionally devastating.
Yeah.
And Italio can see their similarity, like the similarities between Marcello and Italio. He feels the connection that Marcello routinely and repeatedly tries to push away. But he can't see what distinguishes Marcello is that he wants to be that normal man.
Yeah.
At all costs.
Yeah. Italo's like almost proud that they represent two kind of like different weird outsiders, and to him that is a damning statement. Yeah. Well, let's talk about Julia some. She's fun. I do love Julia.
That actress is delightful.
Yeah, really good.
She's have you ever seen I Knew Her Well? It is an Italian neorealist film that's kind of like a Star is Born-esque story, except that the fame doesn't ever happen.
Gotcha. Okay.
But heartrending, beautifully acted, and she is the main character of it. So I had seen that many years ago before I ever saw this movie, and so I just have some like baseline affection for her. She's a very talented actress.
Yeah, she's great in this.
Yeah, she's great in it, but I feel like some of the goofiness, silliness, almost like that she is overplaying the feminine brain deadness. If you have not seen her, like the strength of her performance elsewhere, it's like what she is delivering here. This is not it's intentional and well drawn.
Yeah, she's great.
So what happened? We see that her and Marcello get married.
Yeah, which is essentially like, well, the first mission that he's given by the fascism department when he views is essentially he's going to get close to this professor, this socialist professor that he used to have in school, to like infiltrate whatever organizations he's involved in, but that very quickly just turns into, just kill this guy. And so they get married almost as an excuse for Marcello to have a honeymoon in Paris, where the professor lives. So first we see them on a train. There's several like great sequences on the train of them, just their interactions on the train are great.
I think it's so interesting the way this movie shows him failing to be normal in a variety of different ways. Like they're not all the same expressions. And so like here she is trying to perform a very classic heterosexual script, which is we're married. In my past as a woman, I did some things that I should be ashamed of, and I'm looking for you to express your love for me
despite those
or even like kind of softly castigating me for them, but like I'm redeemed by your love, basically. And he's like, I don't fucking care about any of this.
You were saying something? I'm sorry. What? I'm looking out this window, lady. Yeah.
Like, it really gets me. She's like, yes, I'm so melodramatic, and I just want to be loved by you. And he's like, anyway.
That's, really funny.
All right. And then after they're on the train, we see there's kind of this moment of him, Marcello, being trapped in a dysfunctional bureaucracy, right? We see him in some more governmental offices where he's getting orders versus counter orders, and we see him wandering through other rooms again. And these counter orders are given by a man surrounded by walnuts.
Oh yeah,
like
he's just
the
eating them,
covered in walnuts,
and he's got a cracker, and he's just like,
they're just like on the desk.
It's like Scarface, but instead of cocaine, just mountains of walnuts that he's cracking and eating. I love that. I was like, I don't know, is this symbolic of something? I don't know, but I like it a lot. Just
the man in that scene has a circle around his eye.
Oh, I didn't know this.
And it,
like a scar or like drawn on?
Like drawn on, it appears, which just like there is a painting from like the 20s that got like stuck in my head that I was like, it reminds me of this fucking painting. So then I had to go. I could not remember who painted the painting. So I found it after extensive Google searching, which is fucking annoying now. Google is horrible. It just wants to feed me AI art. I'm like, no, I know this is like a guy that was like on the outskirts of the Surrealists, I think. And in fact, yes, it was German painter Otto Dix, 1926 painting Portrait of the Journalist Sylvia von Harden. And that man looked to me to be this woman, like with the circle around his eye, and the nuts on the table. So just wanted to bring that up. And then they hand him, this is the situation where they hand him the gun.
I love that.
And it's a beautiful shot because it looks, well, I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous shot. But it's so funny because he looks like he's going to shoot himself in the head. They hand him the gun and he immediately is like, I'm going to shoot myself in the head.
Well, first he poses like he goes like,
yeah.
He points it one way and then he does like a hop where he points it the other way, and then the third thing he thinks to do is just go and then point it directly at his own head.
And then he pauses and he goes, I lost my hat. So it's just, there's the ventilation of via humor here. It's at this point that we learn that the professor that he's been instructed to kill / volunteered to kill was his professor in school, that he knew him. And Marcelo says in this section, when he's like first having contact with the professor again, the time for reflection is over. The time for action is now. And
that becomes a big runner throughout about like, you must act. It like almost like it is a like
stop thinking about it.
Just
do it. Just do it.
You've
right?
been told this. It is thinking is for losers
cowards.
and libs. Time to act.
Yeah. And then also during this conversation, we hear Marcelo, and this is again one of those just like beautiful shots, also fully illustrates, like it's a thesis statement of the film. Marcelo talks about the allegory of the cave, Plato's allegory of the cave, to compare to November 1928. But then while going back with the professor in discussing this like metaphor of the allegory of the cave to fascist Italy, but then he says like, aren't the people in the cave, like aren't the cave dwellers, like aren't the shadows their reality though? And the professor kind of stares at Marcelo confusedly and is like, you don't really sound like a fascist. Like, you're thinking too much, basically. Yeah. And then he opens the window, the professor opens the windows of the office, and their shadows, which have been cast on the wall, are dissipated and disappear. And then it cuts to the next scene. It was like, oh, it got me. That's cool. You know? It gets me every time.
I like that the professor kind of sees through him, like, almost immediately as far as, like, his fascist tendencies, because I don't think he tells him. He's just like sees it immediately, and even has a conversation with his wife about it,
right?
About how he doesn't fit. It doesn't fit him or whatever. Yeah,
and the repeated like offering an olive branch, and we'll talk about in a minute. The saying, "Come stay with us." Well, letting them continue to stay with them, making time to meet with him, and then encouraging them to go out into the mountains with them. All of that, I think, is very clearly. He sees that there is a core to Marcelo that hasn't been
completely
stamped
corrupted.
out. That hasn't been pressed fully into conformity and is trying to pull him upstream with him, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, the professor has a wife, and boy, does he have a wife who is like much younger than him and kind of this like blonde, I don't know what the word is, but like almost without a care, like a not without a care, but like
she's also kind of giving like Katharine Hepburn a little, you know, like she wears pants and she's hanging out with the men, that are circling around the professor to talk about socialism. She is very commanding and she does not conform to gendered expectations, which I think is really important. The ways in which fascism and quote unquote normalcy within a fascist frame is patriarchal, and that she defies those standards.
And Marcelo becomes infatuated with her, partly because he tells her, or I don't remember if he tells her, but she looks like the woman he lost his virginity to in a brothel, which is
Freudian as hell.
Totally normal too. But yeah, we see them and we see she kind of has an interesting, the professor's wife, an interesting relationship with each character. And that, well, do we want to talk about the wife and Julia first?
Well, I think before that, Anna, which is the wife's
The
name,
wife, the professor's wife,
and Marcelo kiss first before.
Yes, yeah, you're
like,
right.
That
You're right.
is the initial, because Marcelo is drawn in by her energy and joie de vivre and not giving a fuckery, and also probably like her, for that time period, relatively speaking, masculine energy.
Yeah.
I would say.
And it makes him, like, I think because of the losing the virginity story, like, I imagine that being like a formative experience for him of finally feeling like he's acting like a normal man.
Right.
So he's drawn to the woman that reminds him of that woman.
And wanting to retread those old patterns.
It's almost like he's not attracted to her. He's attracted to, like, what she is representative of if they were to be together. Like, she's almost like the more normal option for me. Like, if I had her, I would look more normal and appear more normal and more manly, I guess. I
think it's almost that it's like she is. I think it's almost the inverse, that she is the least normal that that he could engage while being quote unquote normal and being involved in a heterosexual pairing.
Oh, I like that. Yeah,
you know, because she does again defy these gendered expectations. She is on an equal platform with the professor, and she wears pants, and she's engaging men and talking about politics and engaged in political action. You know, she's printing the pamphlets and also talk about in a moment seducing women.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's kind of like she is abnormal but still represents a linkage to normalcy by being a woman as opposed to a man.
And we also see that she kind of might have a hint or an idea of why he's there, because in one scene she tells him not to hurt her and her husband. And that it's also
she says immediately after kissing him.
Yeah. And she's naked in that scene,
yes,
right? Yeah,
she strips in a ballet school.
Yeah. Oh, that, yeah. Also normal, following her to her job at a ballet school with a bunch of children running about. I was like, get him out of there. When I saw this little girls flipping around, I was like, get that guy out of there.
But so they have this like clandestine and also hostile kind of sexualized interaction, and then we cut to seeing Marcelo watching Anna seduce Julia through a door.
Yeah, which another cool shot.
Beautiful shot.
You almost can't even see that he's there. You just get the very like loose outline of his body in the shadow behind the door. And then Anna giving like a knowing look to the darkness in the door. Really cool. I like that whole scene.
Yeah, and Julia does not seem to know that Marcelo is like participating off screen, right? And then from there, the professor and Anna, as we alluded to, invite the couple to follow them to a getaway in the mountains. They're headed off to dinner, where they're going to celebrate and dance. And during this exchange, the professor tries to give Marcelo a letter, which we learn very quickly is a trust exercise.
Yeah. A letter. He wants him to deliver it to what he says is another like anti-fascist in is it in Italy? Yeah, he tells him to deliver the letter, and I think it seems like from the go that the professor is like really trying to feel him out and doesn't actually need him to send this letter. But I love that just as like a plot mechanic and a way to test his fascisticness.
Well, and I think also that like we see the socialists as plotting, and I mean that in a positive way. It's thoughtful, conscientious, strategic, in contrast to the just pull the fucking trigger, no matter what that the fascists play. And in fact, at this same like dance hall, we see that Manganiello. I'm Italian American. I'm allowed to do that.
I'm not. Actually,
okay, you're canceled.
Damn it.
This is classic anti-Italian racism. But that Manganiello has followed
when the moon hit her like a big pizza bar. I'm just trying to do the most offensive thing.
Has followed them to this dance hall, and Marcelo tries to give the special agent Marcelo's gun back.
That is awesome. I love that.
In like what looks like the hallway to the bathrooms, basically. Yeah. And he's rebuked, and Manganiello tells him, fight or be beaten. Like, now we see the shift where the motivations become clear. It's fear, right?
Yeah.
Like, I will drive you by fear.
Yeah.
And then we see that the letter's revealed to be a trick. If Marcello had agreed to carry it, it would have been revealed that he was truly a fascist, because of course the letter will be used against the professor. And then we see, as these kind of backstage conflicts are going on, where Marcello is wrestling with what he, the decisions that lie in front of him, we see that Anna and Julia are extravagantly overdressed relative to what everyone else is on this dance floor wearing. And they begin to like encircle Marcello and hug him tightly. The couples kind of switch positions, and there's this funny bit where Julia proclaims that she I love this line.
Yeah.
I feel so happy that in a minute I know I will feel terrible, right? The hangover of the action for action's sake is coming. And she announced that the professor has propositioned her. And then we get a stark, cold cut.
Yeah. And we're in the Pine Barrens Sopranos episode, baby.
God. Yeah.
There is a sequence in this section specifically that I was like, whoever directed that episode of Pine Barrens had to have like drawn from
There's
this.
There's so much lineage. The actor that plays Manganiello is in Godfather Part 1 and 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's cool. But yeah, we see now Marcello is in the car with the fascist agent, and they are following Anna and the professor.
In the car, like
in the car,
driving.
yeah. In this, like, they're heading to the aforementioned like mountain house that they invited them to, and we see that Marcello is very anxious and nervous, and we see Anna and the professor. They kind of spot them, and Marcello is kind of really not acting at all. But then we see a separate car run them off the road, and a bunch of fascist agents emerging from the woods. So spooky. In like trench coats and hats, and open fire on the car. Oh, they stabbed them. Yeah, they stabbed them. God, that was brutal.
And there's like this
it lingers for a while too on those.
It lingers, and we see there's a part with Anna specifically where it goes to like shaky cam, which is not used in any of the rest of the movie.
All, yeah.
So this kind of like, a lot of the framing that we've talked about is really formal, right? It's very poised. The lighting is incredibly intentional and directional, and it's almost theatrical.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're just like suddenly in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where it's just like shaking everywhere, and it is like a burst of emotion that the camera hasn't occupied.
Yeah,
previously.
The only time we see the camera like in like unsettled or disquieting is there, and then when he's going to his mom's house, I think, where there's like all those wild Dutch angles
it does some
and
Dutch
stuff.
angles.
Yeah. What did you think about the fascists murdering the professor and his wife? Brutal. And also Marcello's reaction in the car of, I don't know, what is his reaction? He's just kind of,
he refuses to take action.
He doesn't take action at all, but his reaction is also odd, where it's like,
I think he's a little moved by her pleas, but not enough
to show that
do anything.
Yeah.
But it's like this very interesting path where by not taking action, he has failed the fascists.
And failed.
But he has also failed to take any affirmative action to save her or the professor, and so is not aligned with them either. Like his, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Well, I was thinking that too. Why can I not think of what that is?
Rush. It's a Rush song. It's
it
libertarian as hell.
Yeah.
It's what came up in my
Is that the one about the trees? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, it's from Tom Sawyer.
Okay. They have a whole song called Trees, which is like,
Rush is kind of verboten in my home.
I don't
my
understand
mom
them, honestly.
loathes them.
Yeah.
So just only their like most popular radio songs have are present.
I don't like. I get like. I don't want to begrudge anyone their like thing because I know they got crazy like fans that say they're like the best musicians of all time and they're very technical. I don't get them at all.
It's all libertarian neckbeards.
Okay, I like that. That helps me place this a little bit better. But the one song I really don't understand is they have one that's like a epic battle of the years about like the trees, that it's like the elm says to the pine fir, and it is the weirdest song.
And it's anytime not about ants?
It should be. That would be way cooler. No, it is literally just like the different trees and how they react to each other. Anyways, Rush stinks.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was beating around the bush earlier. They stink. They're so weird and not in a fun way.
But, he Marcello can not conform
at all.
But he also cannot act with purpose that is defined by his own needs, beliefs, ideology.
Yeah.
Because his unconscious motivations due to his past experiences, memories, parental failings, being unmoored from his societal environment due to his like unique pathologies, he can't even be aware of his own desires. I think that's part of it. There is like the desire to conform has supplanted his ability to be aware of what other desires might stand in its place.
Yeah. And then we get a time jump, a first significant time jump that is 5 years later, 1938 to 1943, I think. Yeah, and he has a daughter now with Julia, and they are listening together on the radio to Mussolini's resignation, and we have Italo returns. He gives him a call. And what did you think about all this sequence of the resignation? Also, you mentioned it earlier, but how little Mussolini is actually mentioned in the movie. Just kind of the specter of... Do they even mention him before the resignation?
He's mentioned very briefly at the beginning when they're talking about...
Him and Italo?
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah.
Because when they talk about Hitler.
Hitler, yeah. But really not mentioned at all in the movie until this moment. And only when he is only in passing.
Which again, I think focuses on that like action for action's sake, conformity for conformity's sake, because there is no like grander vision that he's plugged into. He's severed his ability to connect with the past or the future. He can only be like free floating while guided by drives that he cannot comprehend or like thoroughly inspect. But this a few things about kind of the ending. One, I think it is very interesting. I brought this up in the Damned episode, but there is like a strong connection, visually at least, between these endings where how we see Julia in like these eerily blue rooms where she looks super pale and totally devoid of life, and how we see Sophie looking at the end of The Damned before she completes suicide with the cyanide capsule, where her face is painted white.
Yeah.
And in those really boldly colored rooms, where it's just like the life has been totally sucked out of these environments, right? It's just like the shadow. I love you saying that Mussolini's like the specter haunting this place. I think it's really interesting here that Julia is mostly concerned about what Marcello is going to do now that the fascists are falling. Like, she seems to have some concern about, like, is there going to be a reconciliation process? Are people going to be mad at the fascists? Like, what are you guys going to do?
Yeah.
But Marcello, that old chestnut, conformity, he's like, there's so many of us. What are they going to do about it? There's so many of us. How are they can't target all of us. And so
we then see what he does about it, which is...
He goes on a walk, right, with Italio, and we see them initially kind of like shying away from and kind of being skittish in response to like motorcyclists and parades walking by, crowds who are celebrating Mussolini's fall. When they walk past a street, I can't tell if it's like under a bridge or just
sort of like alleyway,
where Marcello hears the voice of Lino. The past is not the past.
Who he thought he had killed.
Comes back.
But evidently had not.
The ghost returns.
Yes. With a fucked up wig. I'm assuming that guy's hair doesn't look like that.
No,
but like,
it does not.
Just
He's
a really
got like
bad
a
wig.
bald cap and then a wig
with like
attached to the bald cap.
If you, like Greg Turkington doing whatever. I can't remember the guy's name.
If you elected to have a toupee that didn't make you look less bald.
Yeah. Like, give me your worst toupee. Yeah. Give me the one that like a dog chewed on, and then you just throw it on my dome.
And then this is, again, I think so interesting. It's the only time in the movie that we really see Marcello, aside from when he attempts to shoot Lino in the first place, super agitated, like emotionally activated. He starts interrogating Lino and finally accuses him loudly of killing the Quadris, which are the professor and Anna, before Lino sprints into the darkness. And then Marcello abandons Italio, pushes him off of him, and points and shouts at him as a liberatory parade descends on them, accusing him of being a fascist, calling him, saying, fascist, he's a fascist. And they both push against the flow of the crowd until Marcello is left alone, and we see him wandering to find a young male sex worker.
The same one, right, that Lino was talking to.
Yes.
Yeah, the same kid that he was like just kind of like trying to take the moral high ground on Lino. He's not explicit, but like, he's kind of postures himself as like almost like he's stopping something, and then he's with the same young sex worker in that final scene.
Right. And I think it's, again, when you engage in action for action's sake, when you engage in conformity for conformity's sake, when you treat it as an end, a means and an end, it's empty. There's nothing left there that's devoid of meaning. And so the pursuit of conformity left him alone.
Yeah. And again, what struck me this movie is how relevant it feels to the problems we see now with white men, I'll say, in our country that are searching for that meaning, that have been told for like years that the problem is elsewhere, and that the real problems of our country and our world are not the issues. Search for the meaning in your life here by basically accusing everyone else, which is what we see. Like, his last resort to find meaning is putting everything on his friend and this guy who, Lino did do some fucked up shit, but he didn't kill the Quadris. A real banger of an ending.
Right, and that he can be responsible for nothing. Like, that ultimately...
He washes his hands by, like... that. I also felt like that's kind of what that was, too, was, like, his wife's like, well, what do we do? He's like, And then, like, him, to himself, he's like, I took care of it. I put it all on him. What fascist? I don't remember what you're talking about. That wasn't me. Yeah, that kind of, like, abdication of responsibility.
On every level, because that's...
Every level,
right, he's trying to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, escape from the frightening freedom of liberalism or Marxism, those Enlightenment ideas of individuality and striking your own path and endeavoring towards progress in some form. And because there is no foundation for him, the center cannot hold.
Right. He's never going to be whole. He's just going to kind of bounce around whatever the next thing is and trying to find that. Great movie.
Right.
2 for 2.
Right.
2 for 2.
I'm telling you, these Italians, they know. I'm making.
They know a little something.
I'm making a hand gesture, listener. They know a little something, and I like them a lot. What are What are we going to cover next?
Oh boy. I am excited about this one because I do like this movie. I just, when I saw it the one time, I was like, that was enough.
Yeah.
But we're going to watch Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salò, or 120 Days of Sodom, which, yeah, we're going to cover it. It's going to be something.
Yeah, we're going to cover major everything warning for that episode.
Oh yeah. If you are a little anything triggered by a little anything, then maybe skip that one.
Recommend not listening to that.
Also, if you're my dad or mom, go ahead and skip that one.
If you've listened that long, don't listen to the next one.
Yeah.
Also, very excitingly, we're gonna have a guest for that episode. One of my bestest friends in the whole world, queer theorist, literature extraordinaire, and cinephile, Jared O'Connor.
Yay. I'm excited to meet Jared. We've only met in Twitter,
the Twitter universe.
land. Yeah, just in passing. So,
but he has been watching all three of these movies. Actually, we will, by the time we record that, we'll have watched all three together, but he viewed the previous two. So in that third episode, obviously we'll talk about Salò. We'll talk about something that I think I told Craig off mic, but that I learned that there was like a group of fascist isolationists or something in Salò. That some of that is real. I had no idea prior to digging into some historical context for this episode. So we'll definitely talk about that. But then we're going to talk about some big themes across all three movies as well. And Jared's a genius, smart, beautiful, funny man who will provide some insights.
There's only room for one of those on this podcast, Jared. Just kidding.
Conform. So join us next time.
Yeah, we'll catch you on episode 42. Kill the poor.